and welcome to the very first ever episode of Sportstopia's Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast. My name is Chris Crawford, and we're so thankful and excited for you to join us on this journey. I'm joined today by my good buddy and longtime podcast compadre, Drew Silva. So before we get into the show, we want to talk about what you can expect from Fantasy Fire and Ice going forward. We will have daily in-season shows for MLB, NFL, and NBA, with new episodes coming Monday through Friday. We also have a website in the works that will provide daily content for all three sports, featuring some of the most knowledgeable fantasy writers in the industry. In the meantime, be sure to check out all our social media stuff. You'll be able to find our stuff on X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, on top of me and Drew contributing, we're also very excited that Justin Fensterman, Terrell Furman, and Sarah Sanchez will be a part of the team, and we're so very excited to have them on board. For those who are unfamiliar with me, I've been covering sports for way too long now. I've written for places like ESPN, Vice, Baseball Prospectus, Sports Illustrated, RotoWire, and I was with NBC Sports RotoWorld for 7 years with my good buddy, Drew. Drew, why don't you provide a little bit of your background, my friend?
Wow. Yeah, good to be on with you, Chris. Good to be starting on this new venture.
Yeah.
I started playing fantasy baseball when I first realized it was a thing, probably in about 8th grade. That would have been like the late 90s. And I've been writing and talking and being sort of a paid professional fantasy analyst, mostly on the baseball side since 2008. Spent 15 years at NBC Sports, Roto World. A large chunk of that time with you doing podcasts and writing player news blurbs and articles and all that good stuff. And been dabbling in daily fantasy baseball and daily fantasy football and daily fantasy golf since that came about several years ago. And I'm fascinated by what we're building here around this contrarian optimizer at Sportstopia at Fantasy Sports Logic, and what it can do for our listeners to make some money and have some fun watching the end of the MLB regular season, then obviously leading into what's going to be a huge football season and then basketball beyond that.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. Drew, why don't we bring in our first guest? We've got a very special guest. Do you want to introduce him?
Yeah, this is Daryl Snyder, who is our president of Fantasy Sports Logic, and the creator, I guess you would say, the founder of the Contrarian Optimizer. And if he wants to come on and talk a little bit about his background and his vision for what this thing can be, and then we'll get into maybe like some best practices for how you personally have been using these tools to create successful lineups in daily fantasy. That was a loaded question for you.
Good morning, Drew and Chris. Great to be here.
Thanks.
You. Sounded, I heard you say X, and it sounded a little strange. I don't know if I've been on the podcast when it's become X, right?
Yeah. We conform with the best of them, Daryl. So we can have our own thoughts about whether or not what that name should be. But Mr. Elon Musk, I'll do whatever you tell me to, I guess.
Times they are changing. Yeah. One of my partners, he followed. He said they had X.com at PayPal, and I guess maybe that was an asset that Elon brought over with him. So that was interesting. But yeah, great to be here. Excited about this podcast, this being the first one, and what you guys are doing and where everything is going. It's like almost 9 months later in development of the Contrarian Edge Optimizer, and we are about ready for prime time. We think that we can handle, after having the tech side figure out how to put together 7 live daily player projection data partner feeds and what we like to call our proprietary secret sauce blend for an 8th feed. It's not as easy as I thought it would be, but I'm not the tech side, I'm the visionary side. So got a lot of great things happening there. The Contrarian Edge name was, as I studied, I've been playing since late 90s. I know you guys can relate if you were born back then or old enough to remember, but we played fantasy with a group of friends, and we kept score in the USA Today, right? Had a
Yeah, the
double
box
check
scores.
Yeah. Yes.
right? And it was fun. I got really excited. The internet emerged, and along came the Yahoo platforms to follow online, and then DraftKings, FanDuel, and I got lucky out of the beginning. I think it's probably something maybe that is created for newbies to win, to get us hooked. But I played a little $3 game back in early, whenever, 2013, 14, DraftKings I think you could enter 200 back then, or at least 150, but I threw a $3 in, I think maybe a couple lineups, and I hit second place. I won a couple grand, and I thought, man, this is it. Here it comes. This is like too easy.
Sure.
As you guys know, I'm a Giants fan, so I played a lot of Giants, and I got lucky. They stacked out and won. But as I played more, I'd realized that there were certain groups of people that were consistently beating me. I looked, and they were always at the top, and I wasn't at the top anymore. So I started to do some internal investigating and found out they were using some tools, some algorithms, right? I kept seeing consistently the same. So I actually started down a path to create one back then. And I got pretty far down the path, and then New York's Attorney General had an opinion that wasn't of what DraftKings and FanDuel were claiming, right? They're saying that looks like gambling.
A game of skill. Yeah.
Right. And so I ceased and focused on some other things. And then to the end of this year, I've been consulting to a company, and I've had a few companies, but I said, 64 years young, what would I like to do that I do anyway, right? I love, it's like a passion. And so I reached out to a couple optimizers. I was going to partner with them, have some television relationships, some streaming with some pretty good distribution. And for all the good reasons, they both politely said, no, thank you, but good luck, right? I'm thinking, wait a second, my offer was must have not been delivered. I'm not going to charge you any money, blah, blah, blah. But it led me to search for my own, and I came across a technology that patented since 2013, has patents through 2034. It was actually a season-long product. 2012, 13, 14, CBS App Central, it was the #1 product on that app. It was called The Machine. So it had some notoriety. But what I've started to have conversations with Leonard, the chief technologist behind it, he's brilliant. His name's on the inventor patent for the GPS chip back with Texas Instruments in the 80s. Wow. And he became fascinated with fantasy and started to play and wasn't doing any good. And then all of a sudden started to put his math concepts together. So we started, I said, I play DFS. These are some of the strategies that I'm familiar with that's winning, stacking. In both football and baseball, there's correlation, a little bit different strategy in NBA. And I started to have phone calls with the premier providers in the industry, the RotoWires, the Sports.io, the Stats Perform, the FTN Data, the Ballpark Pals. And I was having a problem. I liked all the guys, right? I'm like, who am I going to choose, right? I'm going to disappoint everybody but one. Sure. And all of a sudden I had like an epiphany. And I said, I went to Leonard and I said, what if we put in more than one feed? We had like a blend. And he goes, yeah. Little did I know I didn't mean two. I ended up doing 7, including the blend, and we'll have multiple feeds. NFL's just coming up, but I'll stop and let you ask me questions. But there's a lot of strategies when you have that many feeds in a blend. So
I said we just get into the slate and pull up the optimizer, and we can kind of explain it as we go along and just analyze what's on the board for this Thursday, which is kind of a weird slate. Well, not really weird. It's pretty normal for a Thursday where it's divided into some early games and then some night games. Just looking at the weather, first of all, is something you always want to consider when you're playing daily fantasy sports.
Right.
Anyone that's played it at all knows that. For baseball today, here on Thursday, there's no real chance of a rain out. In Cleveland last night, there was a game suspended because of rain, but it looks clear in Cleveland today between the Dodgers and Guardians. Maybe a little chance of rain in Pittsburgh for the Cubs and Pirates, but other than that, we look relatively free and clear on that end. Cleveland and the Dodgers will start up again in the top of the third inning. So you have to consider that, like, maybe there's going to be some key hitters that are not going to play in the second game,
Right.
even though both of those teams are still, vying for playoff spots. The Dodgers are running away with the NL West. The Guardians still somehow alive in the AL Central. But something to consider for the night game of that matchup.
Yeah.
And then we should go like you said, we should talk about some top stacks too. But if you wanted to make a comment about the weather.
No, the only thing I was just going to say is that I think Drew makes a great point with you've got to be cognizant of, especially if you're thinking about playing Will Smith or if you're thinking about playing some of these Dodgers hitters. There's probably not a lot of Guardian hitters that you would be considering regardless, not exactly the loaded lineup, but you could see some of those star players come out. But I think that is one thing that everybody definitely has to keep an eye on. And the other thing you got to keep an eye on too is some injury stuff. And we'll go over this every single week. For those who missed it, unfortunately, we had one of the biggest blows of the baseball season with Shohei Ohtani no longer being available to pitch, but Shohei Ohtani may be available to hit. I would guess that he's not going to be in the lineup anytime soon. So something to keep an eye on, but not necessarily a guarantee that he won't be able to return to the mound. Very interesting situation there. And then Yordan Alvarez, also questionable. What's that injury again, Drew?
He slammed his hand in a door at his home on Tuesday, was scratched for the lineup that night, and then held out again on Wednesday. It sounds like there's a chance he could return to the Astros it's a matinee finale against the Red Sox on Thursday afternoon. I would bet that the Astros just hold him out because it's a day game, but who knows? And I would say in general on this slate, we're going to be targeting the night games anyway. That's where the best stacks are.
Yes.
You can play that early slate as well, but there's just such few games, and I don't think there are as interesting of stacks as you see with the nightcaps.
So, Daryl, why don't you explain to the novices and to even the experts what exactly a stack is and why it can be so beneficial?
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to add Ohtani. He did come back and play in that night game.
Yeah, he DH'd.
Yes.
Yeah. It was 1 for 4 with a walk.
Right.
Had a double. Stacking almost consistently in the multi format. Not so much, if you play a single game or maybe max 3, it's probably risky because you're trying to throw a dart and figure out. But if you do a max 150, I play a lot of DraftKings. FanDuel may be the same, but they have pretty popular all the way down to micro slates, 50 cents, max 150 for $75, or the $3 mini max has gotten some popularity where 50 to 125,000 on top, so you can win 5 to 15,000 for 450. But if you play in all the way up to the 15, that has like early slate, it's 25,000 up top and then 50,000 up top in the afternoon. I started to look, as I've looked for years, who's winning, right? And I would say safely at least 90% of the time, and you may think that that's a high number, but I challenge anybody to prove me different. There's at least a 4, if not a 5-team stack. And it makes sense. It's correlation, right? If you've got a team like the Dodgers going off and Mookie and Freddie, Freeman, Will Smith, as you said, they're causing the Dodgers to score double-digit runs.
Right.
There's correlation because a lot of guys will avoid slap hitters, right? Thinking they're just trying to smash in all the home run hitters, right?
Sure.
Not understanding that a single, a stolen base, and a run scored right? Or maybe a double can add to Mookie hitting a 2-run homer and getting you 16, Freddie getting you a double and a home run. So what the optimizer does, this is just added, and it's auto stacking 3, 4, 5. I like to do 5. Brandon likes to do 4. Excuse me. So that's half the process, right? You have to, the pitchers, that early slate's a little funky today because that Cleveland Dodger game's out. Cole is not starting. There's an opener for Cole with King today. So you got some things in there on that early slate.
Right.
So I'm going to fade that, go to the late. But the pitchers are, I mean, they're the highest scoring players in MLB. So you have to make sure you get them right. What auto does is if you don't lock anybody, if you just say, I want to let the optimizer show me, I want to do auto, I'd do 4 on a little 3-game slate. 5 might be too risky. You might even go 3. The Braves make their own rules. If the Braves are in play, I try to fit, because they're priced up so high with Acuna that you go smaller stack. But you want to stack, you want to correlate with pitchers so you can get really, it's called diversity, coverage. You can get a lot of coverage. And there it is. Let me throw this, I got a little window here. Yeah, if you drop down up here to where it says stacking, see the team stacking up here?
Stacking.
Yeah.
Yep. Auto.
Yeah. And then go over here to the number. Is this the early slate or the main? This is the main, right?
This is the main. Yep.
Yeah, this is good. Okay. Go down to, it's only a 4-game slate. Go to 4. Right here on the drop down. Hit the little drop down arrow right there.
I think it's still loading for me.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's important because everything's going on in the background. It's already going into auto mode. So you'll want to watch this. You'll also want to watch, we're good. Every 30 minutes it updates because these are live player feeds from our partners. You can see as we're waiting who they are. They're not just any partners. The Baker engine, which is provided by Sports Data IO, 10,000 simulations of any given MLB slate. FTN data, 40,000.
Wow.
Still working its way through there.
Probably my computer.
Yeah, no, it takes a little bit of time.
Sure.
So what the strategy is you can, if you just say, I want Luis Robert, or if there's somebody you just think's going to pop, Acuna's been pretty popular, right? You can lock in a position player. So he's 100% across. Again, risky, but if he hits, you're good. Refresh it once, Chris, or whoever's running it, Drew.
That's me.
Yeah, refresh it. I want to show you. Maybe I'll show you the order of which we prefer you go on. Okay, go to number of players first over here before you hit anything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And drop down to 4.
We'll hit main.
Right here.
Four, and then auto.
No, don't. You got 4. Yeah. Okay. But
Yep.
let it go. Don't hit auto until it runs. And these are important things when I do video. Okay, as soon as you see it say or generate lineups, that means it's ready. Now drop it into auto. Okay. Let it run its little course here. And people say, well, why does it take this much time? Well, if you're running 4, and even though you only have a 4-team,
sure,
a 4-game, that's 8 teams. There's a lot of things. So it's ready to go again.
A lot of data.
Hit blue, turn that on. Okay. And then hit generate lineups. And this is without locking anybody. So it's going to give you a nice selection across the board. Okay. There you go.
I mean, these are a lot of the players that Chris and I picked out to talk about
Yes.
in the show, like a potential Diamondbacks, White Sox stack, some Rangers stacks, and then really all the pitchers that we were identifying as smart plays and also value plays.
Absolutely.
So what you can see here, because the screen's only so big and it's impossible to run it across the, what you have, but you'll see the blend. This is proprietary blend. You'll see on the screen that you only see a certain amount. So if you hit, there's a slider, this little arrow to the left or the right. Mm-hmm. And what you can do is you can go through and you can say, well, what really sticks out? Steele and Haney, there's different pitchers, right? Because it's experience. Mm-hmm. There's Williamson for the Reds and Haney. No, there's Berrios. What a lot of people have done, the ones that are just starting to come in, is they'll go back to the blend, because that's taking a mix of all the 7. Right. And then you can go down and you see down here in the bottom where it says generate multiple lineups and there's a white box.
Yep.
You can go a max all the way up to 150.
Wow.
Just shoot 50 once in there. Then hit generate lineups. It's going to generate a report. And look at the report. Look at what it just did. How diverse it got you.
Yeah.
It shows out 4 stacks from all those different teams. You could have went into pro settings and said, there's no way I want to have any blank, right? Or you could have got really super condensed with the stack. You could have eliminated pitchers. Like if there's some openers that are only going to go an inning, you can fade the pitchers. And then what this does, you say, okay, well, I see that, but I want to see more specifically. Hit the X. Get out of that thing once. Hit the X up here. Boom. There's your lineups.
Awesome.
And it shows you. It would have showed you 150. It would have showed you on a, tonight on a 4-game slate. So that's how I've been doing a lot better lately, because I'm getting coverage, right? I listened. I don't know if you two ever. There's an awesome book about fantasy called Dueling with Kings, Daniel Barbasi. And he talked about when they went from 200 to 150 max and strategy was changing. It was more about coverage, right? You want to get coverage, meaning my strategy is I don't care if 145 of my 150 crash and burn. If 5 or one of those 5, like last Saturday, I got second and third, right? Mm-hmm. Which the slates are top weighted in those max, right? I ended up turning $75 into 600 something. Like nice. It was right. And again, we throw disclaimers out there. We put together the best that we can put together, but we can't, because I do something or you guys are going to start, playing it a lot. It shows it's capable. So this is even going to go further, and we're going to have, let's just say, well, I don't want to play 50. I want to play a max 20, or I just want the 10 of the best, right? Mm-hmm. And you go through each one of these. Probably by next week, you'll be able to check a box and it'll pick out just those and throw a CSV file for that into your, this is optimized for DraftKings and FanDuel. So we're super excited about this. It makes it easy. We tried to dumb things down to Daryl. I'm Daryl, and I kept working with the guys, right? How can we make it? And you can see right now, even you got to get used to a few things, right? A lot of people want to get in and start clicking on things. You got to let it kind of do its thing, wait till it shows you it's ready to go. But what kind of questions do you have on what that is, what it just showed you?
I think it all makes sense.
Yeah,
go ahead, Chris.
I think it makes sense. I wanted to ask you a question that's kind of related to this and kind of not. So as more people start playing daily fantasy sports, Daryl, what do you think the number one mistake new players make when they're starting to get into daily fantasy sports?
My biggest mistake is following my heart, right? You got to totally, I'm a Giants fan, and, I have 2 problems. One, I like to play the Giants, which their offense has been anemic this year. They strike out a lot. 2, I don't like to play the teams playing against them. So you have to have a mind eraser and just say, look, are you here to root for your Giants? Which some people, That's why they play, right?
Right.
But are you here to win? And what I like to say is, if the Giants get beat, but the team that beat them wins me money, then that's kind of a good trade-off for me. Not that I'm rooting for them to get beat.
Right.
And two, you gotta, I mean, this is data, it's math. And with all the technologies today, machine learning, AI, chat GPT, 3, 4, 5, 6, wherever we are with it, right? All the latest and greatest.
Sure.
Never in the history of the game have we had so much data, right? And so much, I mean, look at what this, I believe, and you guys are out there. Have you seen anybody with this many player projection data partners in
No.
one
Absolutely
optimizer?
not. Absolutely not.
I've
Not
played
even
around
close.
with quite a few of them, yeah.
Yes.
And I think this is a unique thing that you have here that we have here.
Absolutely. Why don't we talk about some of those stacks that we're looking at? And Drew, why don't you start with what I think is the most obvious one? Drew and I talked a little bit backstage about one that we might disagree on a little bit, but I think there's a fairly obvious stack that people are going to be going after tonight, but it's certainly something that's still worth considering.
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers just stick out to me. Like, obviously, they're not playing their best ball of the season as of late, but it's clear that they still have one of the best offenses in baseball. It's why they are where they are. You know, in addition to some starting pitchers really stepping up. But I think they're due. I think you'd be silly to think that this losing streak is going to continue perpetually. This could be a get right situation in a spot where maybe people are leaning away from them because they haven't played well. So, I mean, I'm looking at a stack of, Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, Jonah Heim, Adolis Garcia, and obviously those are going to be some expensive guys on the board. But that's where you look for values. Like, I'll throw in a Brent Rooker, who's going to be, a left-handed hitter who's going to be facing a righty in Jesse Schultens, or also on the board, like a Yoan Moncada, who has not had a good season, has had a very injury-plagued season. A Christian Walker, who's been slumping, but, is relatively, reasonably priced. A Tommy Pham, like guys that you can build around that Rangers stack, I think would make a lot of sense. Even going against, Pablo Lopez, who can pitch really well at times.
Yeah, that's my one concern about that stack is just that how well Pablo Lopez has pitched over these last couple of games, 6 innings of shutout baseball in each of them. However, there could be some regression to the mean here as well. And we have seen Pablo Lopez not show a ton of consistency as well. So that's kind of a thing where that makes sense to me because the Rangers they have to start going up. Pablo Lopez probably has to start going down. I've got you mentioned a couple of Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks are my stack for sure. Ken Waldichuk, there's some long-term potential here, but he's definitely somebody I'm looking to face whenever possible. So my stack is I have Corbin Carroll, Christian Walker, Tommy Pham, and Gabriel Moreno going against him because I want as many quality bats as I can have against those guys. And I think you get good value too with Pham and Moreno and Walker because he's been struggling. I'll also throw in Lourdes Gurriel makes some sense as well as a sort of a cheaper outfield play that I think he's on a nice little streak here, 4-game hitting streak, picked up RBIs in 2 of his last 3. Those would be the guys that I would be attacking, mainly because I think Ken Waldichuk does have a chance in the long term, but in the short term, he's absolutely a hit pitcher that I'm attacking.
Well, the Diamondbacks are facing Brandon Williamson, Chris.
Brandon Williamson.
It's the same idea.
Yeah,
it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say
has to have one mistake, man.
There's another factor in that.
Please.
You stole my second stack, which would be the White Sox, who stick out because they are facing Ken Waldichuk.
Yes.
And I mean, there's so much drama surrounding the White Sox right now. Just got rid of their 2 highest front office executives, a miserable season. And now I think a lot of the attention is focused on the players because, all right, you got these 2 front office leaders removed. And now it's up to you guys to show that you have some talent to finish out the rest of the season. But I like that kind of environment around a team.
Sure.
And I like that they're facing the A's. And so I would consider Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Tim Anderson, Andrew Vaughn against a lefty tonight as the White Sox take on the Athletics. And, like I mentioned, Moncada is a really cheap option that should be in the lineup. Andrew Benintendi has, tends to bat second against lefties, and he's very cheap. But like you mentioned, Daryl, that's sort of the slap hitter that you want to, or that, people have kind of the instinct to avoid in DFS because you're looking for homers and stolen bases. But Benintendi can get on base and hit some singles, maybe hit a double and get around and score a run for you or collect an RBI. And for his cheap price on DraftKings and FanDuel, he makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think those are the three main offenses that I would target on this main slate or the night slate would be the Diamondbacks, the White Sox, and the Rangers.
Daryl, you wanted to bring up there was another factor when I was talking about the Diamondbacks, but real quick, everything I just said about Ken Waldichuk is the exact same thing for Brandon Williamson. There is some long-term potential there for sure, but right now, not exactly a guy that we were trusting. But what was that other factor you were talking about?
Well, the Reds, they pitched in a doubleheader yesterday, and they used like 4 or 5 pitchers in each game. They used Diaz came in at the end. They used another guy twice. So you're going into Arizona that's susceptible to having hitters favored over pitchers. So if they happen to get to that Williamson that you're talking about, then the bullpen, I think, is going to be gassed a little bit going into Arizona. So that could lead to Arizona, right, all of a sudden hammering on. So I like that a lot. Not that I don't like yours, Drew. The White Sox and the Rangers both could put up some numbers. But
sure.
Yeah, as I was listening and thinking, Chris, that I sat and watched, and it showed the pitchers that the Reds had used in both games, and I don't know what they have left in the pen.
Yeah,
they're right. They're battling the wild card for the Giants and the Marlins, and so they're going all
the
out.
Central.
Yeah, in the Central for sure.
Yep.
The starting pitchers that we're basically stacking against, the one we didn't mention, Patrick Corbin going up against the Yankees. Yeah, the Yankees lineup is not exactly the 27 group that we have going on here, but Patrick Corbin has mostly been an ineffective pitcher. Ken Waldichuk, definitely. Brandon Williamson. And then Ryan Pepiot. That's a really interesting one that we kind of talked about before the show, Drew. The stuff is real good. The command can be real bad. And that would be someone I'd be a little nervous about because I can see a bunch of walks. And if you could create self-inflicted damage, yeah, the strikeouts could be nice as well. And he certainly has looked the part in the minors and has had his flashes of brilliance in the majors as well. But that's probably not an arm that I'm attacking, even against a pretty bad Cleveland lineup.
Yeah, and again, he's going to be pitching in that second game. It's essentially a doubleheader.
Sure.
I mean, they get to finish out the suspended game. I would think that maybe he gets like an even easier Guardians lineup if they can even throw out an easier Guardians lineup.
Sure.
And maybe that stuff plays, but he's a little bit risky for me given some of the other options on the slate. I would be tempted to stack against him even and the Dodgers bullpen in that kind of doubleheader environment
100%.
if there were enough Guardians that I really felt good about. I would think about picking out a few players from that lineup that maybe the contrarian edge optimizer spits out as being value plays, which there are some on the board.
For sure. And on the reverse side of it, let's look at some starting pitchers that we are looking. I'll start with Jesse Schultens. Like, not exactly the most exciting name out there, but he's going to be one of the cheapest, whatever daily fantasy play you're making. He's going to be one of the cheaper arms. He's gone 6 innings in his last couple of starts. He has allowed 3 runs or fewer, which is nice to see as well. That does give you the chance for the win. You might be wanting to pair him with somebody who's a little more likely to miss bats just because you're probably not going to get those strikeouts from Schultens. But anytime you're facing a double-A lineup, and that is basically what you're facing in Oakland, I'm sorry, folks, it is not very good there. You can take a look at the record for evidence about that. But I like Schultens as an option tonight.
I like Gavin Williams. We've been talking a lot about this Guardians Dodgers, the second half of that twin build. He's been awesome since the Guardians called him up. Super steady, good command, and could face I mean, Will Smith is probably only going to play one of those games, as we mentioned before. Maybe a Freddie Freeman or a Mookie Betts gets the night off in the nightcap. As something to consider with these Thursday games too that we didn't mention is like there's going to be a lot of getaway day lineups. And
great point.
We're doing this show before most lineups have come out. Maybe there are some early slate lineups that are out already, but I mean, you got to watch for players that aren't going to be in there just because they're taking a routine day off. Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts don't get a ton of routine days off, but just something to keep in the back of your head. I like Gavin Williams to be kind of a sneaky play, even though he's pitched well. You don't feel good putting him against the Dodgers normally, but
Right.
when it's the second half of the doubleheader, and JD Martinez went on the injured list finally. So maybe that lineup is a little more gettable than it's going to be in a normal situation. And Gavin Williams has the stuff to get it.
For sure. And the other thing I think with Williams is I think, we talk about it. I don't think he's going to be in everybody's lineup tonight. I think that there's going to be some people who fade him, and that gives you the chance for that contrarian thing. And that's when you get the chance to win the big money, is when you get a pitcher like Gavin Williams who performs well against a good lineup and everybody else fades him, but you've got him in your lineup. It's high risk, high reward. Justin Steele, look, we can talk about how win-loss record is an extremely flawed statistic in real life. It's fantasy sports, and he's gotten an awful lot of them this year. 14 wins, only the 3 losses, a 2.8 ERA. I think he's looked decent over the second half, not quite as good as the first half from him, but I think there's been just enough good stuff from him for him to be an option. And I'll be honest with you too, Drew, this is not my favorite starting pitching group that we have as well. So if you're going to put this together and you've got to have 2 starters in your lineup, give me the guy who's had some success playing for the team, who is absolutely playing for their playoff lives, and I'll take that in Justin Steele.
Yeah, that is the one spot on the night slate where there could be some weather, and for starting pitchers, almost a delay is worse than a postponement, because you maybe get an inning out of him, or you and then the game is stopped and he doesn't return. So just be aware of that as lineups stream in the afternoon and early evening. My other starter that really stuck out to me is Andrew Heaney. Going for the Rangers. I'm all Rangers today, man. They're gonna stop this losing skid. Going against a Twins lineup that just really has struggled to find consistent offensive production all year, and Heaney's been great. There's been some blow-ups here and there, but overall, what he has brought to that Rangers rotation is a big part of why they've taken such a big step forward in the American League West. The Dane Dunnings of the world too, and obviously that offense, but he's been a really steadying force for that rotation, and I could see him cruising against the Twins. I think it's a lineup that is cruisable against.
Daryl, do you see any starters that we didn't mention that might make sense, or any of those names stick out to you?
It's a small slate, right?
Right.
Steele's probably, we have our ownership projections on there. I would imagine he's going to be pretty popular, even though the price against Pittsburgh Cubs they're right there in the thick of things as well. So I kind of like the Heaney play with what Drew just said. Who's pitching for the Diamondbacks against the Reds?
Merrill Kelly is interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
I like Kelly. He's at home, and the Reds, again, they played 3 games in 2 days. Right. And I'm not, they're young. It's not like they're a veteran team that may, but Diamondbacks too. Reds, Cubs, Giants, they're all condensed in that wild card. And so they're going to be playing for everything. And what I like to do is look at ownership. You guys know how important that is, right? And you only have 4 games. Yesterday I thought he would be more popular. One of my better picks, the optimizer popped out, was the left-handed pitcher for the A's that struck out 11 and had a Rogan. He was only 5,600, right? I thought he's going to be super chalk, and he ended up only being 20-some% owned. But you want to get, contrarian means getting different. You got to play some of these like we've talked about. So I tend to look and see, and as things shift around in the day, if there's any weather involved, which you said there isn't. So I look at, okay, who do I want to be with 70% of the field, or do I want to be ahead of 70% of the field? So that makes a lot of my decisions on pitching. If I think they're, at least have a shot at a quality game. So if Kelly's not super owned, which he may not be, what's it show on ownership projection on the optimizer?
Yeah, so Steele is the highest owned by far at 42% projected ownership. Pablo Lopez second, Merrill Kelly's third, Haney's fourth. A guy that sticks out kind of Jesse Schultens, who I mentioned a little bit earlier. He's the kind of lowest projected of all the starting. Well, Brandon Williamson and Ken Waldachuk are down there too, but
Right.
Schultens is interesting to me, Chris. Is he kind of interesting to you as well?
Yeah, like I talked about earlier, it's just because of the fact that he's
Yeah.
facing that Oakland lineup and he's gone deep into games. Like, he's efficient. He's not a big bat misser. He throws strikes, he challenges hitters. And against a lineup like Oakland, that's great. If you're facing a good lineup, yeah, Jesse Schultens is a hard pass, even with the success that he's had in these last couple. But yeah, absolutely like Schultens. I will also say JP France is pretty interesting as well. He's pitched really well as of late as well. The Boston lineup could be a little bit tough, but there are some interesting arms going today, but definitely not targeting Waldachuk or Williamson. Everything else, I think you can actually make a decent argument for.
I like it.
In terms of hitters, like, I mean, the optimizers really like Seth Brown, who I mentioned earlier. TJ Friedel, perhaps, like, gets a start and does some damage in Arizona.
Sure.
Brent Rooker, Cabrian Hayes, who it doesn't put up a ton of counting stats, but maybe going against Justin Steele. And then there's some White Sox, Andrew Vaughn, Andrew Benintendi, Zach Geloff too. He's cooled off a little bit, but from where he was, anyone would have to cool off. So just running through some players that the Edge Optimizer likes. Build your stacks, lock in your starters, and find a little value left on the board.
So, Daryl, before we wrap things up, you got to talk about the co-op, because I think this is something that's really cool going on. If you could talk about how that works and how people could sign up for that, I think that'd be really appreciative.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that concept has started to get a lot of traction with player-owned, like Messi, right? Coming over to Miami, player-owned teams. Over in Germany, there's fan-owned teams, and here in the United States, there actually is the largest example of a co-op and a sports team is probably the Green Bay Packers, right? Well, I heard that they're kind of owned by the fans. In that case, it's sort of just a bragging rights certificate of ownership. Where I think things are moving, and this was the vision I had when put together, not so much in the beginning of Fantasy Sports Logic and the Optimizer, but Sportstopia, a platform to play on. As players, there's like necessities, right? We need a place to play. So, right? You're going to find out, if you haven't already, you're at a disadvantage without a tool. If you're like me, you can't see my screen because I'm not sharing, but I have a dozen windows open at any given time, and I'm looking for the latest and greatest information like these shows, right? To try to find out where I might get an edge. So the environment that I was looking to create was, what if we could create a Sportstopia type daily information of articles and videos across MLB, NBA, NFL, PGA, which is the core four of what the optimizer will be offering.
Sure.
What if you could offer the tool? What if there was, if you're like me, I like to watch the fantasy shows on the weekend, sometimes throughout the week. I'm maybe like you guys, or maybe different. I like to see where everybody's going, and then I tend to try to lean the other way. So, whatever way you're using the information. So the co-op was, some of these platforms have some crazy high evaluations, right? Into the billions. And the only reason that they're getting those kind of evaluations is because players are participating in them, right? So what if we created and we carved off 20% of the upside of a Fantasy Sports Logic Optimizer, a Sportstopia premium content, or the value of a Sportstopia? We have a movie coming out. I don't know if you guys are aware, Ed and Peter Schenke from RotoWire. It's called The Game Within, the history of fantasy sports from the late 50s, early 60s, all the way to present, where it's going. A documentary with a docu-series. If you look at the popularity of sports documentaries on streaming.
Sure.
So this isn't out there advertised as a security, but currently $699.97 for just a limited amount of time, because it includes 10 $20 entries into the best ball tournament with Drafters, one of our partners, $100 credit deposit into Drafters. So there's $300 worth of value. A lifetime, one-time all sports, currently MLB. We just added an NBA feed. We'll have a PGA feed. We'll have we just added NFL feed. We'll have a NBA feed and a PGA feed. Lifetime subscription to the Optimizer. VIP member-only tournaments that you don't pay for that have prize packages. And oh, by the way, if one of these becomes a unicorn and there's some upside and there's some profitability, sharing it back in a loyalty program that I don't believe anybody else is doing. There are some loyalty programs, so you're going to hear more about this. I'm really sensitive to it doesn't get promoted for somebody to just come in and throw $700 and not do anything. Patronage is where you're going to play anyway, right? So you play on a Drafters and you get involved with their tournaments, whether it's best ball or if best ball's over, whether it's going to be, they have player prop opportunities in there. They have regular fantasy, daily fantasy contest. If you're going to consume content, why not consume content on a place like Sportstopia,
right,
where the more you engage, the more of that percentage of the 20% you share. And the other part of it is that refer to people. We track referrals, so eventually it's going to be a leaderboard, right? It's going to show who are the most people playing and referring, and that's patronage. So I'm super excited. It's ahead of its time. Eventually, I think a lot of businesses are going to have to embrace that, because without your customers, what do you have? You don't have anything. We're sitting here talking to nobody. We're providing information to nobody, right? So stay tuned for the details. Right now, there's three options when you sign up for the Optimizer. It's actually four now. $1 test drive 7 days. I mean, $1, right? To get your feet wet. If you're not MLB, NFL is in, and you can start to use it. We had somebody use it for the exhibition Monday night game. Didn't know what they were doing. Just filed the Optimizer, and they won.
Nice.
Is that going to happen every time? We don't know. We'd like to hope that it happens a lot.
Sure.
So they can do the test drive for $1. They can, if they like. We don't auto upgrade people. I know people, I don't like that when somebody all of a sudden I just realized I didn't. But if you like what you see, $29.97 a month for all the sports. If you want to take advantage while we have it in beta, the $299.97 lifetime, one time, all sports, all upgrades, that's available. Or now the promo with the cooperative element to it for $699.97. And when I set out in the team, it was trying to create something disruptive that had super value, right? Where they just looked and said, well, I've never seen this much information that I actually know how to use, I can learn how to use, and for the pricing. And I mean, you guys, now we've added this free content, right? That's just insane. So I'll stop there. You can tell I'm passionate, but I wanted to kind of get that out there on what it was. And
yeah, it's great stuff. We're biased, of course, but we can't recommend it enough. Thanks everybody so much for tuning in to the inaugural episode of Fantasy Sports. I knew there'd be a struggle at the end too, folks. This is just the way these things
the first
go.
one.
Yeah, Sportstopia, Fantasy Fire and Ice. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Crawford_MILB. Drew is at Drew Silv. Make sure you're following all our social accounts as well. They're going to be at Sportstopia HQ. And we especially appreciate if you follow us on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and know that we're going to have daily episodes every single weekday. Really appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.